Close your eyes for a moment and remember a single summer from your childhood. Not a specific event, the summer itself. Remember how it felt. Endless. The mornings were entire worlds. The afternoons stretched out like oceans. A single Saturday felt longer than an entire month does now. Then open your eyes and ask yourself a much harder question. Where did the last 5 years go? Did you live them? Or did your brain just stop recording? Most people assume this is just a feeling, a romantic illusion, a side effect of getting busy and tired and burdened by adult life. It isn't. Time actually does move faster as you age. Not in physics, but in the only place that matters, your brain. And in the last decade, neuroscientists have finally identified the precise mechanisms behind it. There are 3 of them. Each one operates at a different level of the brain. And by the end of this video, I'll show you exactly how to slow time down again without quitting your job, without moving to a cabin, without changing anything dramatic about your life. But first, you need to understand what's actually happening. Because once you see the mechanism, you can never unsee it. And you may never look at the way you spend your days the same way again. The first explanation is the one most people have heard. It's called the proportional theory. When you're 5 years old, 1 year is 20% of your entire existence. 20%. That's enormous. That's a continent inside your life. A single year, when you've only lived 5 of them, is the largest unit of time you've ever experienced. The wait between birthdays feels geological. When you're 50, 1 year is just 2%. A sliver, a footnote. The wait between birthdays feels like nothing, barely a season passes, and another candle is on the cake. So mathematically, every year of your life is shorter relative to the whole than the year before it. Each year is a smaller fraction of everything you've ever known. By this logic, the summer you remember from childhood didn't just feel longer. It was longer as a fraction of your lived experience. Compared to everything you knew at age 8, that summer was an enormous chapter. Compared to everything you know at 50, last summer was a paragraph. There's actually a way to picture this. Imagine your life as a logarithmic spiral, where each new year wraps tighter around the last. Year 1 is a wide, slow turn. Year 50 is a tight, fast one. From the inside, time always feels like it's moving at the same speed, but the spiral itself is closing in. The geometry of perception is bending under your feet. But the proportional theory only explains part of the puzzle. Because if it were the whole story, time would slow down again whenever you experience something genuinely new. And anyone who has ever taken a long trip to a foreign country knows that's exactly what happens. A week in a place you've never been can feel longer than 3 months at home. The proportion math doesn't change, but the experience of time absolutely does. So there has to be something else going on, something more interesting. And there is something happening underneath the surface of your perception. Something measured in milliseconds, something your brain is doing right now as you watch this video that you have absolutely no awareness of. It's called saccadic flickering. Your eyes don't see the world the way you think they do. You don't perceive a smooth, continuous video. Your brain stitches together a series of frames, a series of mental snapshots, and edits them in real time into the illusion of a single flowing experience. The faster your brain takes those snapshots, the slower time appears to move. This is why a child can spend an entire afternoon staring at a single anthill and not be bored. Their brain is recording at maximum frame rate. Each second contains hundreds of distinct perceptions. Every detail is new, every movement is captured. But as you age, your brain becomes more efficient. It stops recording redundant data. It compresses the familiar. It assumes, based on years of pattern recognition, that the room you're sitting in looks the way it looked yesterday. So it doesn't bother capturing it again. Researchers at Duke University have measured this directly. They found that the rate of mental image processing declines steadily across the human lifespan. Not because the brain is failing, but because it has learned to skip what it already knows. The engineers behind your eyes have decided over decades that 90% of what you're looking at is redundant, and they've optimized accordingly, which means your brain is literally taking fewer pictures of your life. And the fewer pictures it takes, the faster time appears to fly by in retrospect. There's an experiment that demonstrates this almost too well. Researchers asked subjects of various ages to estimate when 3 minutes had passed, with no clock, no counting allowed, just an internal sense. Children consistently overshot. They'd say 3 minutes had passed when only 2 had. Their brains were producing more subjective time per second of clock time than the world was actually delivering. Adults in their 50s consistently undershot. They'd think only 2 minutes had passed when 3 had already gone. Their internal clock was running slower than the wall clock. The world was moving faster than they could record it. That's not a feeling. That's not a vibe. That is a clinically measurable shift in how much subjective time your brain produces from a given amount of objective time. It's a falling exchange rate. Every passing year, the dollar of the day buys you less subjective experience than it did the year before. Now, this is where it gets philosophical, because if time is built out of mental snapshots and your brain has stopped taking them, are you really living those years? Or are you just existing through them? Hold that question. We're going to come back to it because there's a third mechanism, and it's the most important one. It's the one that ties everything together, and it's the one that gives you control. It's called novelty encoding. Your brain decides what's worth remembering based on a simple rule. Is this new? If it's new, your brain encodes it, files it away, builds a memory around it, allocates the cognitive resources required to capture it in detail. If it's not new, your brain ignores it, compresses it, treats it as background noise, assumes you don't need to remember the millionth time you brushed your teeth, which is why you remember almost every detail of your first day at a new job. But you can't remember a single Tuesday from last September. Now think about how a child's life is structured. Almost everything they experience is new. Every food, every face, every word, every emotion, every social interaction, their brain is on fire with novelty. Their entire existence is one long, continuous recording session. And then think about how your life is structured now. The same commute, the same route to the grocery store, the same conversations with the same people about the same topics, the same coffee, the same office, the same bed. Your brain is barely encoding any of it. This is why so many people in their 40s and 50s report a strange feeling, a feeling that the last decade just happened, with no real shape to it, no texture, no clear sense of where one year ended and the next began. Whole stretches of life that, when they try to remember them, return nothing but a vague impression, a feeling, a blur. It's not amnesia. It's compression. Your brain has been treating most of your adult life as background noise. I told you we'd come back to the question of whether you're really living those years. So let's answer it. The honest answer is partially. You are living through them, but you are not encoding them. And because you're not encoding them, they will feel in retrospect like they barely happened at all. The Tuesdays of your 40s will, in your 70s, be a single gray block, indistinguishable, irretrievable. Lost not because they didn't happen, but because nobody was filming. That's the cruelty of routine. It doesn't just steal your time. It steals your memory of having had time. But there's good news, because once you understand the mechanism, you can hack it. And this is the part nobody talks about. You can deliberately slow down time. You can make a year feel like a year again. Maybe even longer. The trick isn't dramatic. You don't have to quit your job. You don't have to sell your house. You don't have to fly to Patagonia. You just have to inject novelty into the routine. Studies on memory consolidation show that even small disruptions to your daily pattern force the brain to start recording again, take a different route to work, eat lunch in a place you've never sat, read a book in a genre you've never touched, have a real conversation with someone you've never talked to before, cook a dish from a country you've never visited, sit in a different chair in your own house. Each one of these creates what psychologists call a memory anchor, a timestamp your brain can return to. And when you stack enough memory anchors into a year, that year suddenly feels long again, rich, textured, like the summers of your childhood. Travel works powerfully here, but not for the reasons most people think. It's not because travel is exotic. It's because every minute of travel is novel. Your brain has never seen this hotel ceiling, never tasted this bread, never crossed this street, never heard this language, so it records all of it, every detail, in high resolution. That's why a single week in a foreign city can feel longer in your memory than 3 months at home. You weren't gone longer. You were more awake. There's a fourth mechanism nobody talks about, and it's worth knowing, because it explains why some people in their 70s still feel like time is moving at a reasonable pace, while some people in their 40s already feel like life is slipping through their hands. It's called emotional saturation. Your brain anchors memories not just to novelty, but to emotional intensity. The events you remember most vividly from any decade of your life are the events that made you feel something strongly. The first kiss, the funeral, the day you got the news, the night everything changed. But here's what happens to a lot of adults somewhere in midlife. The emotional volume gets turned down, not because life stops being meaningful, but because the nervous system has learned to dampen its own responses, to get through the workday, to handle the small daily disappointments without breaking, to absorb the news without falling apart. A kind of low-grade emotional flattening sets in, and as the emotional volume drops, the memory anchors stop forming, which is why two adults can live the same year, same job, same routine, same neighborhood, and one of them at the end of it feels like the year was rich and full, and the other feels like nothing happened. The difference is rarely about what occurred in the world. It's about what was permitted to land emotionally. This is why grief ironically often slows time down. People who have just lost someone often describe the weeks after as feeling enormous, not because anything good is happening, but because the emotional system is so wide open that every detail is registering. Every small kindness, every breath of wind, every face on the street is being recorded. You can borrow this mechanism without needing tragedy to trigger it. The trick is to let things matter again, to stop performing emotional moderation as a default setting, to actually feel something when something is worth feeling something about. The walk on a beautiful day, the compliment from a stranger, the taste of a really good meal, the face of a child you love. Permission to feel is permission to remember. You don't have to leave your country to do this. You don't even have to leave your neighborhood. The same mechanism that makes Paris feel long can be triggered by a walk down a street you've never walked, in the city you've lived in for 20 years. The brain doesn't know the difference between Paris and the next neighborhood over. It only knows novelty. And novelty is everywhere. For anyone willing to step slightly outside the path their feet have already worn into the ground. There's a deeper layer to this still, something the researchers don't always talk about, because it crosses into philosophy. Time, as you experience it, is essentially a record of attention. Where your attention went, time went. Where your attention skipped, time skipped with it. Most modern adults spend their attention on screens, on notifications, on the same handful of apps, the same handful of feeds, the same loops of small dopamine hits. The brain treats all of this as repetition, as noise, as Tuesday. The hours pour through this filter and come out the other side, compressed into nothing. Children don't do this. Children pay attention with their whole bodies. They look at things. They touch things. They ask why. Their attention is undivided, unfiltered, almost terrifyingly present. And as a result, their time is enormous. You can do this again. Not perfectly, not constantly, but enough to bend the curve. The simplest practice is this. Once a day, for 10 minutes, pay attention to something the way a child pays attention, without your phone, without a goal, without a podcast in your ear. Just look. Just notice. The way the light falls on a wall, the face of someone you love, the taste of a piece of fruit, whatever happens to be in front of you. 10 minutes a day of real attention will create more lasting memory than 10 hours of distracted scrolling. The math of memory does not care how long something took on the clock. It cares only how present you were while it happened. Now, here's the deeper point. The point I want you to take with you. Time doesn't actually speed up as you age. Your attention slows down. The years you've already lived weren't shorter than the years a child experiences. You just stop paying attention to them. So the question isn't, how much time do I have left? The question is, how much of it am I actually going to be present for? How many of your remaining years do you want to feel like they happened? Because the alternative is the slow blur, the compression, the Tuesday that vanishes into the Wednesday, that vanishes into the year, that vanishes into the decade, that vanishes into the deathbed thought of, where did it all go? That's a choice. It's been a choice this whole time. And you can make a different one starting tomorrow morning. Even something as small as walking out your front door and turning the opposite direction is enough to wake your brain up. I want to give you one more thing before we close, because there's a question that often comes up when people first start practicing this, when they start trying to slow time down on purpose. The question is, doesn't this just make me notice the boring parts of my life more vividly? The honest answer is yes. At first, because most of us have been living on autopilot for so long that we've forgotten what our own daily lives actually contain. When you start paying attention again, the first thing you'll notice is how much of your routine is in fact mediocre. The bland coffee, the cluttered desk, the conversations that don't really go anywhere, the slow gray weight of moments you've been auto-skipping for years. That's uncomfortable. But it's also useful because once you can see those moments clearly, you can change them. You can switch the coffee, clean the desk, have the harder conversation, notice which parts of your week you've been silently enduring, and start to redesign them. The brain on autopilot can't change anything because it can't see anything. The brain that wakes up is the only brain capable of redesigning its own life. So slowing down time isn't just about making the years feel longer. It's about giving yourself the capacity to actually shape what fills those years. The two are the same project. Attention and the agency that comes from finally being awake inside your own existence. The endless summers of childhood weren't a magic that you outgrew. They were a cognitive state, a state your brain is still capable of producing at any age. You just have to give it something new to look at. So I want to leave you with one question. Tell me in the comments, when was the last summer of your life that felt long? What were you doing? What was different about it? I read every comment, and I think the answers are going to surprise both of us. Subscribe if you want the rest of this series. The next one is about a question I think most people are afraid to ask out loud. Why is your memory changing, and is it actually a bad thing? I'll see you there.